A full glass of wine poured straight down Daniel Reyes' chest in front of 400 guests. It happened because Elena Cross, CEO of the Halden Group, looked at him and saw nothing more than a driver who had wandered somewhere he didn't belong. Laughter spread across the ballroom in seconds. Only one person moved to stop it, a young intern named Priya, but she was too late. Daniel looked down at the stains spreading across his shirt, said nothing, and reached calmly into his pocket for his phone. 60 seconds later, that phone call would end a $2 billion deal, and no one in that room understood why yet. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Grandpa's Story Chair. And before we get into it, tell me in the comments which country and city you're watching from tonight. I read every single one of them. Daniel Reyes had learned, a long time ago, that nobody looks twice at a man in a plain gray jacket driving a black sedan through downtown Chicago at 6 in the morning. That suited him fine. His days started before sunrise coffee in a paper cup, his daughter Mia still asleep down the hall, a folded note on the kitchen counter reminding her to eat the sandwich in the fridge before soccer practice. He was 38, a widower for the last 4 years, and every decision he made ran through one filter: what was best for a 7-year-old girl who still slept with the hallway light on. By day, he drove for a private car service, mostly executives who barely glanced up from their phones in the back seat. By night, after Mia was asleep and the dishes were done, he opened his laptop at the kitchen table and did the work almost nobody knew about: quiet, careful, unglamorous work, moving numbers that belonged to a small investment firm registered under his daughter's name. He had built it slowly, deliberately, keeping it invisible, because visibility had never once made his life easier. It had only ever made people expect things from him. His apartment was small. The heater rattled in the mornings, and Mia's drawings covered the refrigerator door in overlapping layers. He liked it that way. He had turned down bigger places, better addresses, because bigger addresses came with bigger questions, and questions were the one thing Daniel Reyes had spent years learning to avoid. The invitation to the Halden Group Gala arrived by mail, which surprised him because he never used the address printed on the envelope for anything but tax filings. He almost declined. Galas meant rooms full of people performing wealth at each other, and he had never had much patience for performance. But the deal on the table, a $2 billion expansion for Halden Group's logistics division, needed his signature by Monday, and his lawyer had quietly suggested that showing his face, just once, might smooth the final terms. So he agreed, on the condition that nothing about it be announced. Nobody at Halden Group, outside of 2 people in finance, knew that D. Reyes Capital belonged to the man who sometimes drove their own executives to the airport. He told Mia he had a late meeting. She asked if he was excited. He said it was just work. What he didn't tell her was that the deal represented 3 years of quiet building, careful relationships, and one enormous bet on a company whose CEO he had never actually met in person. Elena Cross ran Halden Group the way she ran every room she entered: fast, sharp-edged, allergic to anything she couldn't immediately categorize. She had built the company from a mid-size regional operation into a 9-figure player in 6 years, and she had done it by trusting numbers over people. She had reviewed the financing structure of the deal a dozen times. She had never once looked up the face behind the signature line. Daniel arrived at the Halden Group Gala 20 minutes late, in a suit he'd owned for 6 years, and handed his invitation to the young man at the door, who checked it, thanked him, and let him through without a second look. Inside, the room sorted him instantly, and without malice, a man alone in an unremarkable suit reads, "In a room like that, as someone's assistant, someone's +1, someone who wandered in on someone else's ticket." He didn't correct it. He took a glass of water instead of wine, and found a spot near the wall where he could watch the room without being watched back, which was exactly how he preferred every room he had ever stood in. Priya Nair noticed him first. She was 24, 3 months into her internship at Halden Group's investor relations desk, and she had a habit one her manager kept warning her about of watching people instead of networking with them. Daniel stood differently than everyone else in that ballroom. He wasn't performing. He wasn't scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. He was simply there, quiet, holding a glass of water, and something about that made her curious enough to keep glancing his way, though she never worked up the nerve to introduce herself. Nobody in the room knew what he did for a living. Nobody asked. And for the first half hour, that suited him perfectly. It was Elena who broke the silence around him. A little after 8, doing her usual circuit of the room she was hosting. She disliked loose ends. And a man standing alone near the wall, unaccounted for, registered as exactly that. "I don't think we've met," she said, smiling the smile she reserved for people she hadn't yet placed. "Who are you here with?" Daniel answered simply. He worked in finance, he said, and left it there. It was true, and it told her nothing, which she found faintly irritating. She asked which firm. He said it wasn't one she'd need to worry about tonight. That answer, more than anything, settled something in her mind. In her experience, people who ran anything significant said the name first, before anything else. A man who wouldn't say it was a man protecting something small. She had met dozens of them, and they all showed up at galas hoping proximity might rub off on them. When she mentioned, almost carelessly, that the car service outside was for guests, not staff, a few nearby heads turned, and a small ripple of laughter followed, not because it was especially funny, but because she had made clear that laughing was the correct response. Daniel didn't react. He simply said he'd arranged his own transportation and let the moment pass. But Elena had found her evening's entertainment, and she wasn't finished yet. 20 minutes later, she came back, this time with 3 board members trailing behind her, steering them toward the wall the way a woman steers guests toward an exhibit. "I want you all to meet someone interesting," she said, nodding at Daniel. "He's in finance, very mysterious about the details." The laughter that followed was polite, but pointed. One of the board members asked, half joking, whether he moonlighted driving cars too, a guess close enough to the truth that Daniel almost smiled. He didn't correct it. He answered every real question and let the rest pass through him without landing. Priya, standing near enough to hear it, felt her stomach tighten with each exchange, but she said nothing, telling herself it wasn't her place. Elena's questions sharpened as the night went on, each one a little more pointed than the last. Each one met with the same, even unhurried calm. It frustrated her in a way she couldn't quite name most people. Faced with that much scrutiny in a room full of people they wanted to impress. Cracked, eventually. Daniel didn't crack, and the longer he didn't, the more it began to feel, to Elena, like a kind of insult all on its own. By the time Elena reached the small stage near the windows to make her toast to the evening, she had gathered a crowd of 9 or 10 people around her, most on their second or third drink, and she had decided, without fully admitting it to herself, that she wanted an audience for what came next. "I'll tell you what 6 years running this company has taught me," she said, loud enough to carry. "The people who've actually built something don't stand in the corner being cagey about it. They're too busy building it. The vague ones," she gestured faintly toward Daniel without quite looking at him, "are usually the ones with the least to show." A ripple of laughter moved through the group. Daniel, several feet away, finished the thought for her without raising his voice. "Some people make a great deal of money," he said, "and never learn what it's for." The room around them went quiet in a different way. Nobody laughed. One of the board members looked down at his drink. Priya took an involuntary step backward. And Elena Cross, who had spent the whole evening deciding when the laughter happened, felt a stranger take that away from her in a single sentence, and she did not take it well. She crossed the distance between them fast, and there was a wine glass on a nearby table, still full, left behind by someone who'd gone to refill their own. She picked it up without breaking stride. Priya saw it coming a half second before anyone else, and opened her mouth to say something, but she was too far away, and too late. Elena turned the glass over Daniel's chest and poured it slowly, deliberately, until the last drop ran out onto the carpet. For a moment, 40 feet of ballroom went completely silent. Then the laughter started first from the small group around her, then spreading outward the way laughter does when no one wants to be the only person not joining in. Phones came up, 15, 20 of them, held at chest height, capturing a man standing perfectly still with wine soaking through his shirt. Elena raised her own fresh glass to the room. "Send the dry cleaning bill to my office," she said, playing to the crowd now. "Though, honestly, that suit's probably worth less than my flight home." The laughter climbed again. Daniel didn't wipe the stain. He didn't step back. He looked at Elena Cross, steady and unhurried, and asked a single question in the same even voice he'd used all night. "What's your full name, for the record?" She laughed and told him spelled it, even playing along, certain this was the beginning of an empty threat from a man with nothing behind it. Daniel nodded once, reached into his jacket, and took out his phone. He held it to his ear. 4 seconds of silence. Then, quietly, 3 sentences that would end her evening. "It's me. Halt the transaction. Effective immediately." He lowered the phone and put it away. Elena laughed harder than she had all night. One hand braced on the table, telling the crowd around her that the man had just canceled a business deal from his phone, standing in her ballroom in a soaked shirt. It became, in that moment, the funniest thing anyone had seen all evening. Nobody was laughing 11 minutes later. Elena had just stepped onto the stage to announce, in front of every guest, that Halden Group's $2 billion expansion had entered its final stage, when her assistant came through the side doors at a dead run, face drained of color. He reached the edge of the stage and made a short, sharp cutting motion with his hand. Elena finished her sentence, stepped down, still smiling, and asked off microphone what was wrong. Her assistant said 4 words into her ear, and the smile came off her face the way color drains from a photograph. He handed her his phone. The $2 billion transaction had been suspended, not delayed, not under review, suspended, effective immediately. Every credential to the deal's data room revoked on both sides, time-stamped at 8:43 that evening. She called the counterparty directly, standing at the foot of the stage while 200 people watched her do it. It rang out. She tried again. Voicemail after a single ring. Someone had seen her name and declined to answer. Her eyes moved across the room and landed on the man in the ruined shirt at the back. "No," she said. "Absolutely not. He's nobody." Her assistant, following her gaze, went very still, because he had spent Tuesday afternoon compiling a briefing document with that exact man's photograph on the second page, a document Elena had never opened. "Elena," her assistant said. "Elena, listen to me." But she had already turned toward 2 security officers near the service doors, pointing across the room, telling them the man in the wine-stained shirt had made a phone call in the middle of her gala and needed to leave. Heads turned. Phones came back up. Priya stepped forward before the officers reached him, put herself between Daniel and the approaching guards, and said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "He hasn't done anything. I watched her pour a drink on him 20 minutes ago." One of the officers hesitated, glancing toward Elena for confirmation she no longer had the composure to give. That was when her assistant finally got the words out, loud enough that the whole back half of the ballroom heard them. "That is Daniel Reyes. He is the founder of DS, Reyes Capital, the lead investor behind the exact transaction you just suspended 20 minutes into canceling on live television." The room went silent in the particular way 400 people go silent when they realize, all at once, they've been watching the wrong story unfold all night. Elena's recovery was fast, too fast, Priya would think later, for it to mean anything. Her face reorganized itself into practiced regret before the silence had even settled. "Mr. Reyes," she said, hand extended, "I owe you an apology. A real one." Daniel looked at the hand and didn't take it. "An hour ago you asked if the car service was for staff," he said, quiet enough that only the people nearest had to lean in to hear. 20 minutes ago you poured a glass of wine down my shirt and made a joke about the dry cleaning bill to this entire room. Nothing about either of those moments has changed in the last 5 minutes. The only thing that's changed is what you found out about me." He asked her one question, and let it sit in the silence long enough that the answer became obvious to everyone listening. "If everything you assumed about me had been true, if I really had been someone's driver tonight, would you be apologizing right now?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Daniel didn't stay to enjoy it. He collected his jacket, thanked Priya quietly for the one thing she'd done that no one else in that room had, stepping forward before she knew who he was, and left through the side doors within minutes, leaving 400 guests to rearrange their memory of the evening without him. The deal wasn't killed outright. Over the following weeks, Halden Group's board opened an internal review that didn't stay internal for long, once footage from the gala started circulating. Elena Cross stepped down from her position within the month. The transaction was eventually restructured under new leadership. with terms considerably more careful than anything she would have accepted before that Friday night. Daniel never asked for an apology beyond the one that was never really given. He didn't release a statement, didn't name the guests who'd filmed him laughing, didn't chase anyone down. He did one thing only. He offered Priya a position at his firm, the only person in that ballroom who had decided, without knowing a single fact about him, that he deserved to be treated like a person rather than a punchline. That night, after Mia had fallen asleep, Daniel sat at the edge of her bed for a long while, still thinking about the room, the phones, the laughter that had started before anyone even knew what they were laughing at. In the morning, over cereal, she asked how his meeting went. He told her it went fine. What he didn't tell her, what he decided, instead, to save for a story someday, when she was old enough to understand it was the only thing that had actually mattered that night, that the way a person treats someone they believe can give them nothing back is the only honest measure of who they really are. Status never decides who deserves respect. Character does, and it only ever shows itself in the moments nobody thinks are being watched. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. And in the comments, tell me this: do you believe kindness still exists? I believe it does, if even one good act can change someone's life.